everyone, and welcome back to my channel True Crime and Trials, where I discuss true crime and trials. My name's Lindsay and this video is the Bob Durst trial, and let's get on with the next two witnesses, which is Alicia Landman-Reiner. Now, she's a family doctor and was at medical school in 1978, and she knew Kathy Durst. They had classes together for the first year and partway through the second year. Alicia knew that Kathy was married and at some point found out she was married to someone part of a large real estate family in New York, but Alicia never met Bob. Alicia did see Kathy with injuries. There was one time when she came to class and Alicia noticed she had a reddish injury on her face and neck area. Alicia did have concerns when she saw that. She says it didn't look like it came from a fall or anything unintentional, like anything unintentional like that. She thought someone had done that to Kathy. She says that Kathy seemed excited about becoming a doctor, and this is a running theme through many people that speak about Kathy, who they knew from medical school, that she was very, very excited about becoming a doctor. She would always be on time and would be organised, and she seemed serious and dedicated. There was a time when on rotation at medical school, Alicia had to call in sick because she had chicken pox, but she did call the place where she was due to start the rotation. She certainly wouldn't have called the dean. She did hear about Kathy's disappearance at some point, but doesn't know when. So on to the cross-examination. Alicia can't remember when she last saw Kathy, and she didn't really socialise with Kathy outside of medical school. Alicia also wasn't aware of how close Kathy was with the dean, so the defence, like they have been the whole way through, pushed this issue, but Alicia really can't make a comment on why Kathy would call the dean and not the clinic she was due to work at. And honestly, I don't think she understands what type of relationship the defence are meaning between Kathy and the dean, because they're making it sound sordid. And I think a better word they could use is close friendship, not relationship, because you see the look on people's faces when the defence team say, "Are you aware of the relationship Kathy had with the dean?" And they look taken aback. So now someone called Stanley White comes up, and it's someone who Kathy dated in medical school, but that's the bulk of her testimony. So next is Helen Block, and she's an emergency room doctor since 1995, and she was at medical school with Kathy when Kathy was in the class of 82. Helen says Kathy was bright, very nice and polite, and a very sweet person. Helen says they were casual friends and they weren't close. She saw Kathy outside of school a handful of times. She did know Kathy was married but never met Bob. Now, Helen is experienced in dealing with victims of domestic violence, and she did see Kathy with an injury when Helen saw her in the cafeteria. She said Kathy had dark glasses on and there was tears in her eyes when she took them off. And she had a black eye which looked like a traumatic injury to her. And looking back now with years of experience, as it seemed to her that somebody had punched Kathy. Helen also says that she wasn't the only one that saw Kathy with a black eye that day. And Kathy told Helen that she wasn't staying with her husband and that she was in a safe place, and they obviously told her not to go back with him. One of Kathy's friends called Helen to tell her that Kathy was missing. She can't remember who that friend was. So now we move on to the phone call to the dean, and Helen also finds it highly unusual to call the dean to say you were sick to work. So cross-examination, again, the same question, if she knew how close Kathy was to the dean, but Helen doesn't know anything about it. The majority of them don't. The dean had wrote a letter to Kathy saying that he understood that things weren't going smoothly for her and offered her help. Helen hadn't had a letter like this, but I'm presuming that she didn't need one. She was getting through medical school fine. Basically, the defence are pushing home that the close relationship Kathy had with the dean, and So why wouldn't she ring the dean when she was too sick to go to her rotation? Do I? No, I honestly do think she would have rung the clinic where she was doing her rotation. I don't understand why she would bypass that. Based on the testimonies of people who were in medical school with her, how serious she was taking it, why she would not call the clinic. Fair enough if she called the dean after. I don't know, but Helen was not aware that Kathy was using cocaine while at medical school, and DeGuerin is now trying to point out the symptoms of cocaine hangover. He says one of them is a headache, to which Helen says, not usually, they are just tired and sleep a lot. I mean, he manages to get every single witness up on the stand to go into defence mode with him. He tries again with diarrhea, but again she says nothing in her experience. So then he says, well, back then cocaine was cut with a baby laxative, which Helen agrees with, but she has never seen. In her years of experience, anyone experiencing those symptoms due to a she's never seen it. She's never seen any of those symptoms with people that are experiencing a cocaine hangover. But DeGuerin does manage to get Helen to say that it's not impossible. A small win there for DeGuerin. I mean, woohoo. Helen didn't report the black eye, and she doesn't think anyone else did. She was also aware that Kathy and Bob had got back together and were living together. So redirect, Helen agrees that if Kathy had been heavily using cocaine, she would have noticed, and that Kathy wouldn't have been able to get through medical school as far as she had if that were the case. So it's shown that Kathy was having to borrow money to pay for medical school, which is news to Helen because of where Kathy lived and the car she drove. So she obviously thought she was rich. So Mr. Lewin is showing a memo from the medical college that says a check that Kathy wrote for $3,100 had bounced. It doesn't surprise Helen that due to the abuse that Kathy was getting at home, that it would have affect her performance at medical school. So Kathy had to get an emergency loan for $600, and there's a receipt for another loan and another. And Helen is not aware of any of this. Neither did she know that Bob gave Kathy an allowance. So, just awful. Bob is absolutely loaded. Why would he do that? The reason why she didn't report Kathy's black eye back then is because it wasn't the culture back then to report it. Rather, you encourage the person to report it. She didn't know if Kathy reported it. When Helen saw Kathy that day, she said that she seemed sad and humiliated, as you would. So the recross, DeGuerin says that it makes sense that the dean would get involved with Kathy when she was having so much trouble, which Helen agrees with. And he also says that generally people that use illegal drugs need money, they use money, and they bounce check, which Helen has to agree with again. That's all well and good, but she was using the money to pay for medical school. So I don't think this drug issue is as bad as what the defence are trying to make out. Obviously it's their job, but I don't believe it. And honestly, the defence team are getting right on my wick. They're just so childish. And I've forgotten his name, the other defence lawyer. He just sounds like, I don't know if he means to sound that way, but he just sounds like he's just attacking every witness that is brought up. And it's horrible, because these people are coming up and taking the stand and talking about someone from the 70s, early 80s. And it's hard for them to remember everything that they said back then. Plus the interviews, I think the interviews were done in 2016 with Mr. Lewin. So again, they're trying to remember things from 5 years ago. So I think they should give them a bit of slack. I don't think any of them are portraying Bob in a bad light because barely any of them knew Bob. They just knew Kathy, and they're just reporting on what they saw and the brief conversations they had with her. So, you know, trying to discredit any of these witnesses is just ridiculous because there's nothing to discredit. Nothing. So there we go. I will be back with more in the next video. So until then, bye for now.